Well, welcome back. We've talked about, in the last couple of hours, we did an overview of what a community development training program is all about. We found that there were three people that are critical in the program. One is the community development trainer, and we've talked in detail about what their job is and who might be on that team and how many people would be on the team. We've also talked about the role of the committee. Now, in this hour, we want to talk about the role of the community development volunteer, or sometimes we say the C.D.V, community development volunteer. And so what we have for you is a video. I want you to watch the video and look at it and say, according to this video, what are the jobs that a C.D.V does, that the volunteer worker does. And then we'll come back here to this group and we'll talk about that in this group.
The third group that helps lead community development training is the Community Development Volunteers, or C.D.Vs. These are the men and women who are recruited by the community leaders to undergo training and then be trusted to put the development plans and programs into action. C.D.Vs are volunteers who will be the frontline workers and deliver the peace plan to the local people. These positions do not require much formal education. They will need a willing heart and serving hands. The first responsibility of the community development volunteers is to be trained in CDT. Volunteers will be trained to reach out to their neighbors and help their community develop in all 5 areas of the peace plan: spiritually, socially, financially, physically, and educationally. Volunteers will receive training through practical lessons and participation in stories, songs, role plays, demonstrations, and small group discussions. Volunteers will learn to share practical physical lessons, like how to prevent disease or perform basic first aid. Volunteers will also learn spiritual lessons, like how to share their faith and teach the basics of being a follower of Jesus and living a purpose-driven life. The second responsibility of the community development volunteers is to share what they've learned in their training during home visits with their neighbors and other people in their community. C.D.Vs will use the same physical and spiritual truths they've just learned to teach their neighbors how to live healthier, purpose-filled lives. Most people are more comfortable and open in their own home, and these home visits give volunteers a great opportunity to live out their faith by connecting, serving, and sharing more deeply with others. The third, and probably the most important responsibility of the volunteers, is to continue the development work after your training team goes home. Peace trips are intentionally short-term so that communities don't become dependent on outsiders. The peace plan's goal is for communities to learn to depend on God and their own hard work. Since your team won't be able to stay and make sure the work continues, CDT relies on the local community and especially the local volunteers to lead the development efforts. Your team's role is to train, equip, and encourage those that stay in the community to keep bringing the peace plan to their people. Your team will know CDT is a success when volunteers begin to multiply. Your training team will train the C.D.Vs. The C.D.Vs will train their neighbors. The neighbors will train others. As more community development volunteers appear and begin to work in a community, the ideas of CDT will spread, and the community will grow in each of the 5 areas of peace. As the volunteers keep multiplying and communities become healthy, those volunteers will start looking for other communities that need to be healthy too. When CDT begins to move from community to community, your team will know that peace is on its way and the giants are on the run.
Well, we just seen the video on what is the role of a community development volunteer. So what I want us to do here is talk about what is the roles, what are the different jobs that a C.D.V volunteer does. What would be one role?
Well, one of the roles that we saw was that the C.D.V. is responsible to apply what they've been taught so that they can serve as a model within the community.
Super. They're a model because that's the important thing. Nobody's going to believe them unless they do it themselves. So modeling is a very important element. Okay, what else?
They're responsible for home visits with a certain number of families, so they go to their homes.
Okay, so they're responsible to visit homes and share what they've learned. Did you see in the video how many homes they were going to visit?
10 to 15?
Yeah. And generally, it's about 10 to 15 of their closest neighbors. Good. Okay. What else is their job?
To teach the prepared lesson plans to these families.
Okay. To teach lesson plans, as well as we actually give them picture books, too, that they can share. So it's sometimes in a group setting, they'll use the lesson plan, and when they do home visiting, they'll use little picture books. Good. What else?
Individual multiplication.
Okay. As they are doing home visiting and talking about the program, the people that they're sharing with hopefully will put it into practice, and then they'll begin to share with other neighbors. So there's individual multiplication. But there's a second kind of multiplication. I don't know if you caught it on the video, but it's a village multiplication. As other communities begin to see what's happening, they're going to want to do the same thing. So the C.D.Vs become the trainers when they move into the nearby village. Now that'll be the nearby ones where that happens. So you've got individual multiplication going on, and then you have community multiplication going on. Excellent. Okay, what else?
When they're doing the home visits, they can also do discipling and evangelism when it's appropriate.
Okay, good. So when they do home visiting, they can do evangelism, they can do discipleship as it's appropriate, because you aren't necessarily going to do that every time, because if the mother's baby is sick with diarrhea, you don't want to do aggressive evangelism with her because she's not going to be listening to you. But when it's appropriate. Now, there's one other thing that relates to that. Sometimes the C.D.Vs also will lead Bible study groups, too. Okay, good. Anything else on the job of the C.D.V.? Okay, let me ask you another question then. The next question I want to ask you is, who do the C.D.Vs report to? Who's their boss?
They report to the committee.
Okay. Why is it important they report to the committee instead of the trainers?
Because we want them to have local ownership.
Okay, local ownership. And how long is that the training team? Is the training team always going to be there? Who's always going to be there?
The local people.
Yeah, the local people that make up the committee. So it's important that they report to the committee. Okay, now, what we're going to do in the small groups, your leader has a stack of strips. There are, I think, about 17 strips. And it talks about what are the qualities. Each strip has a quality on it. And one quality might be faithful, but not all the strips are good. Sometimes the strips aren't quite so good. Drunkard. Or whatever. So what your role is in your small groups is to look at all these strips, pull out the ones that you don't want. Sometimes they may even be confusing. One strip might say men and women. Another strip might say men only. Another strip might say women only. Well, you wouldn't use all of those. You have to decide. So what I want you to come up with are those strips that you think would be good qualities for a community development volunteer. Once you've got those strips, then we want you to put them in priority. What do you think's the most important one? What's the second? What's the third? What's the fourth?